Hi guys, Kelly here, and I wanted to share with you my most recent reads, and these are actually the end of the books that I read in March. So I'm very excited to have finished March out strong and moving into April. So I have 5 books here to talk about. And the first one is The Winter's Crime by Marie Rutkoski. And this is the second book in the Winter's trilogy. I read the first book in this series back in January, and I really liked it. This one is fantasy in the fact of more like it's political fantasy, like there's no magic or anything like that. And in the first one, we're kind of just seeing, we're following a girl named Kestrel, and she is the daughter of a general who has kind of helped the emperor conquer some different areas, and there was some fight back and, you know, like rebellion, stuff like that. And this is following the events from that one. And that one, the first book, I really enjoyed. I really liked all the political intrigue. I liked that she is a very smart character. Like, she's strong and she'd be capable of fighting because she's been raised by a general, but really her strength is in her strategy. And so I really enjoyed that as part of the character. And I really enjoyed the kind of like slow burn romance and everything for the first one. This book, though, really disappointed me. I ended up giving it 3 stars, but there was a while there where it was coming close to a 2. It actually took me since January 31st to read this, so it took me exactly 2 months. I just finished it on March 31st because it just dragged a ton in the middle. Like, we started off good, you know, we started where we left off, and then it just kind of really got bogged down with very like middle book syndrome and like a lot of angst, and it was just really hard for me to get through, and I wasn't like really invested anymore. And then once we got to about the last third, it picked up. So when I actually did pick it back up again towards the end of March, I flew through it, and I still want to read the 3rd book, but this one I just feel really suffers from that middle book thing where it's like a bridge and not a lot of exciting stuff is happening in this one. So I don't know. I still might recommend the trilogy as a whole. I'm going to finish it off, but I just did not like this middle book. And now let's move into a couple of my 4-star books. I don't have these in physical, so I'll show you a picture. And the first one is Stronger, Faster, and More Beautiful by Arwen, Elys, Dayton. So this is a YA sci-fi, and basically what it is, it's like 6 stories put together into one like story. So we start off with just the near future, and then by the time we get to the last story, we're like very far in the future. It doesn't give exact times or anything like that, but we are definitely far from where we are now. And in each one, we're seeing how technology, and especially in the like area of genetic modification, how technology advances in that has changed like the human race. And as we go on, as we start modifying our bodies and our DNA, and it also like brings up issues of ethics and morality related to genetic modification, because that's stuff we're like already starting to think about now. And what I liked about this is that when you start off with the first story, it's supposed to be set in the near future, and it seems very plausible, the things that are happening in that story. But if you were to just read the last story before reading the other ones, you would think, how would we ever get to that? Like, that seems so crazy. But this is like showing you the progression, which I like, because a lot of times when you read like books that are maybe like dystopian or maybe like set far in the future, we don't get that story of how we got there. And this does kind of go through the different phases till we get to this kind of crazy future. And so I really did enjoy that and the way they did it with the 6 stories. And there is kind of like an overarching link between them, not just the genetic modification, but there's also like this kind of religious zealot type of theme that goes through it, and that's related to the ethics and morality. And so I just really enjoyed that. This was advertised as for fans of Black Mirror. I'm someone that does enjoy Black Mirror, but I can only watch like one at a time because it can really like affect me sometimes, and often it also is very graphic and I have to like cover my face during certain scenes. So if you are somebody that Black Mirror is a little too much for, this would actually be good, since it is YA. There's not the gore that there is in Black Mirror occasionally, and so it is much more toned down, but it still has those questionings of like what the future has in store with technology. So if you are a Black Mirror fan, I think you would like this. The reason I gave it 4 and not 5 is that I did feel like she had a lot of potential and I really enjoyed it, but it didn't quite get to that 5-star status. Like, especially there was something about the writing that kind of bothered me a little bit. I think it was just maybe overly simplified, and maybe that's because she was doing 6 different stories, but like I noticed that when she wanted to kind of show you what the personality of a character was, she would like repeat the same things or have them repeat the same thoughts like over and over again, and it got really annoying. I'm like, yes, I know how you feel about that, or I know this is something that's part of your personality. You don't have to keep repeating it. And I just didn't feel like that was quite what I was looking for. I just did feel like very surface level with some of these characters, and I felt like surface level in the total topic. And maybe that's because she was writing it as a YA and felt like she wanted to really be succinct about what she was saying, but I felt like it had the potential to go deeper, and it didn't quite make it there. And that's about all I have to say about my thoughts about it, but there was something that kind of like will stick with me and like is weird about it, and I wanted to know, like, you can skip this part if you want, but I want to know if other people have this weird thing. So there was one character, I'm not going to spoil like the character or what they're doing because they were towards the middle of the book, but this character is thought as being kind of weird and different from other people because of like 2 things he does all the time, and I do the same thing, and so I'm just wondering if I'm weird too. So I want to know if other people do these weird things. So there's 2 things he did. One was that he, when he hears like certain phrases or things pop out in his mind, he takes that phrase and he makes anagrams out of it and like keeps like making anagrams. And I do that, but not always just anagrams. Like, if sometimes phrases just stick out of my head when I'm talking or listening to something or reading something, and I'll make anagrams, but then I'll also like pull out as many words as I can from that phrase and see how many I can make, or I'll start matching letters and seeing like, I don't know, I do a lot of like wordplay, and I don't do it consciously. Like, it just like something pops out and I'm like obsessed with that phrase for like 10 minutes and doing like everything I can to manipulate it. And then the other thing that he does is he has this thing where when he's talking to somebody or a group of people, he'll see how many of those people, if he were to copy them, would fill like a room or some kind of vessel. And I don't do that specifically, but I do when like every time I'm on the highway, whether I'm driving or not driving, I'm always like taking my car or other cars and seeing how many of the cars would fit in between like the mile markers or in between the like the reflectors or signs or whatever. It's like it happens every time I'm on the highway, and it's just something I do automatically, like I said, without thinking about it. And so I'm just wondering, does that make me weird? Because it feels like these are things like that stuck out his personality as like ways in which the people, like the authority figures in his life, thought you're strange and different. And I'm like, does that make me strange and different? So do other people do these weird things, like create anagrams or try to like fit objects into other objects? So that's just my question. It has nothing to do really with my enjoyment of the book, but it stuck with me that I think maybe I'm very weird. All right, so then let's move on to the next book, and that is What She Knew by Gilly Macmillan. I also gave this 4 stars. I listened to this on audiobook, and I really recommend the audiobook. I enjoyed it. It has 2 narrators because this book is from 2 different perspectives. It's a detective kind of missing child story. So we have the perspective of the detective Jim Clemo, and then we have the perspective from the mother of the child who goes missing. And we're following them both. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good, well done crime, detective mystery, whatever you want to call it. I liked almost everything about it. Like, I really enjoyed following the mother and like seeing her anxiety and like all the emotions she was going through, because that's just the worst thing you can ever imagine, right? And then I liked the developments of the case. I felt like there was enough stuff happening to like keep us moving through the plot really well. I thought that I really enjoyed the way it ended up and everything. So I enjoyed pretty much everything, but I gave it 4 stars because I just felt like, since it was from 2 perspectives, I wanted both perspectives to be very strong, and I really felt like the detective's perspective was very weak, and he was a weak character, and I almost felt like you could take him out of the story and it wouldn't really affect it much, which, as someone who is the main lead detective in a case and a perspective we're hearing from, shouldn't be the way it is. Like, he should have a very strong presence in the book, and I just didn't feel like he did. And I also am concerned about that because this is a series where it's like a detective series where we follow Jim Clemo, so like the next book that comes out that I actually just bought, the next book, is also following Jim Clemo, and I'm like, oh, are we gonna have another time where I really don't feel like I connect to him? So that was a little disappointing, because now I worry about like the rest of the series. I'm hoping that she will improve his character. It just, for me, I just didn't think he was a very strong character to be one of the main perspectives. But I do think it was a good book overall. So that was more of a like disappointment for me, because I know I was going to continue. But if you don't really care about continuing a series and you just want like it can just be read by itself. And I do think it was a good mystery in general. And then I have 2 5-star books, and my first one is Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. I'm sure most of you know what this is about a pig named Wilbur and his friend Charlotte, who's a spider, and Charlotte's trying to save his life by creating these webs with words about Wilbur to like save him from becoming bacon someday. And this is just the sweetest story. I haven't read this since I was a child. I obviously remember enough because it's in pop culture enough that I knew what was going to happen, and I knew the characters and all that. But it was just fun to reread it, and I also listened to half of this on audiobook. I had to return the audiobook halfway, but I thought the audio was really fun. It's actually narrated by the author, and he does this really fun the way he does like the goose and the gander and like the different characters, and I really enjoyed the audiobook. But then I switched to the book, and I still love the characters even just in the written form. This is just sweet. I don't have anything else to say. I loved it, and we'll be looking forward to reading it with my kids. And then the last one is In the Hand of the Goddess by Tamora Pierce. This is the second book in the Alana adventures. In the first book, which I read last month, Alana is a girl who wants to be a knight, but girls can't be knights, so she pretends to be her twin brother and goes to school to become a knight. In this one, we are moving on. So in the first one, is covering the years of when she's about 10 to 13, 14. This one goes from the point where she's like 14 through 18. So both of them are covering a wide range of times. And this one I actually enjoyed better than the first book. So the first book, my main complaint was that I felt like we covered so much span of time, we didn't get to know a lot of the side characters, and I didn't feel like I connected with the events in her life. And this one, even though it covers the same kind of range of years, I thought it was done better, because the way it was done in here, it wasn't small scenes. It would be like an entire long chunk would be dedicated to one event and one time in her life, and we'd be focusing in on that, and then like we would skip 6 months or a year that we didn't really talk about, and then we'd go to another event. And I liked that, because I'd rather have bigger chunks of time when we're really delving into a scene, when we're getting to know the character, what she's doing in that scene, all of her friends and stuff, and then skip like some of that growing time, that in between and all that, and get to another big event. And so I did like the way this book was formatted. It worked for me. I felt like I really grow more attached to her friends and her love interest, because there's a bit of a, now that she's a teenager, there's a bit of a love triangle starting, which some people don't enjoy that, so you might not find that fun. I mean, you could definitely tell in the first book it was going to be heading that way, and this one we're really starting in on that. Some people complain about the romance of this one, because she is like at the very beginning saying, I'm never going to fall in love, I'm so focused on being a knight, and then she kind of slips into some of those things. But I actually enjoyed that, because in this she's a teenager, she's dealing with those hormones of like, she's been dressed up as a boy for years, she's been taught to be a boy, and then suddenly she's having these urges and having these desires, and like even just the desire to want to wear a dress or things like that she's starting to have now that her, body is changing, that she has to debate with. She has to decide, like, does she want to give into those kind of like human things inside her, but that might take her away from her goal of being a knight. And so I really enjoyed so much about this. I liked that there was a lot of action and like stuff going on. I liked the villain in this. I thought they did a really great job of the way they pitted them against each other, and so I really did enjoy this. And also, there's a black cat in this book, and I'm a huge fan of cats. So all in all, that one was my favorite so far. Obviously, I haven't read the other two, but I love it. So those are the 5 books that I have read recently and finished off the month of March with. If you've read any of these, I'd love to discuss them with you, and I will see you next time. Bye!